Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the Joe and Joe Weather Show on this Monday night, the 22nd of February, after taking 3 days off. And the Joe and Joe Weather Show, as is always the case, is now I'm soloing tonight, so I'll explain that in a moment. But the Joe and Joe Weather Show is brought to you by, wait for it, wait for it. Just wait for it a little bit longer. Hold on. Oh, this is not, oh, good Lord. This is what happens after you take 3 days off. Brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware. Long Island's, well, they are Long Island's largest rock salt provider, but guess what? They're getting ready now, starting to get ready for spring. And that means mulch and topsoil and everything you need to get your yard going. Or if you're a landscaper and you need all the good stuff, well, give them a call. 631 756 1125, 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon. And I think they may actually still have some salt left just in case we do wind up with another winter weather event. And also brought to you by Wholesale Holiday Lighting by Giannini at 162 Ocean Avenue in Lindenhurst. And their telephone number is 631 957 5106. Holiday Lighting Specialists with all to provide you with all your decorating needs, or maybe you want to be somebody that gets involved in holiday lighting come the holiday season. Give them a call, 631 957 5106. So Joe messaged me a little while ago to tell me that he's not going to be able to do the show tonight because of the surprise 3.5 inches of snow that he received up where he is in the hometown of Putnam Valley, in the Hudson Valley, and he has spent the last number of hours cleaning it all up. It was a very heavy, wet snow that needed to be cleaned, so he's just totally wiped out and exhausted. So he's going to take an extra day of vacation, and he'll be back tomorrow. So you're just going to have to put up with me tonight because it's just me. And I just want to. I always look at the comments on the videos on the YouTube channel, not just the live comments, but afterwards, people who watch the show at other times. I don't always get to those comments on the same day, but I do get to them within a day or two. And there was an interesting comment by somebody I just wanted to address. It was a very nice comment, suggesting, and I took it as a compliment, suggesting that uh, Joe and I should make arrangements so that there's always a show on, so that we don't take off at the same time. And well, the thing is, we've gotten so used to doing the show together that I'm having a tough time right now just trying to solo this. So uh, but it's kind of one of the it's one of the many reasons why we love doing this YouTube show, because we have gotten away from having to ask bosses about whether we could have the day off. And when Joe and I worked together, we couldn't have the same day off. And there were rarely conflicts, but every once in a while there'd be a day that he needed that was a day that I needed at the same time. So we don't have to worry about that anymore. So I appreciate that you want to have a show on every day, but we did something like 17 days in a row or whatever it was, and we just needed a break. And I think we timed it out okay, except for the fact that we had that wonderful little surprise with the snow that happened today. So anyhow, we're going to go through all that, and it's nice to see everybody on the chat board tonight. Steve Lapointe and Tim is on, and Chris Alley, and I thought I saw Janet Dunn, who with 3 to 5 inches in parts of Bergen County, seems to be in the jackpot zone today. And Mrs. Rayo was on the chat board confirming what I just said with regards to the fact that they are completely wiped out after the cleanup. So let's take a look at what happened today, because it was pretty interesting all the way around. And yesterday, when I put out my forecast on my website and for my Patreon members, I noted that the NAM model was coming in colder and colder with every run. And as a result, I beefed up my snow amounts, which I'll bring up the map so that you guys can see this. Because anytime there's a snow forecast, I don't care, whether it's in whatever month it's in, whatever type of storm it is, be it something that a diver that comes down from the north, or something that moves up the coast, or an overrunning situation. No forecaster is ever going to get everything right. They're just not. It's almost impossible to accomplish such a feat. It's actually a monumental feat to be able to get it almost 100%. Now, so there's always going to be a bust someplace. So I've got the Weather Service maps here, the Weather Service map with the snowfall for today. Uh, and I'm going to start in the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area, where you're seeing amounts. In Washington, D.C. proper, it was basically a couple of tenths here and there. And for Baltimore, about the same. But once you go north and west of those towns, you start to pick up sun numbers of 1 to 2 to 3 inches. And then as we move up into Pennsylvania, around Hanover, which got 5, 4.5 in Spring Gettsbury. I hope I said Gettsbury Township, Pennsylvania, 4.5 there. Looks like 4 or 5 inches all around Harrisburg, 4 inches at Lancaster, 4 to 5 inches in and around York, Pennsylvania. And you start moving up further north toward Allentown. You start to pick up also some numbers in the 3 to 5 inch zone, and even further north and east of there. Now, in and around Philadelphia and New York City, I would have thought the numbers around Trenton would have been a little higher, because they reported heavy snow for what seemed like hour after hour after hour. There were only a couple of snow amounts here. Ewing with 2.1. Trenton Mercer Airport had 2.5. 1.4 in Bordentown, and then a couple of fractional amounts as you head down into Southwest Jersey, down along 295. And then as you move up further to the north at Princeton with 2.5, and then you start to move up to Somerville, Bridgewater, 3.9 inches, some 4-inch plus amounts in Flemington, Frenchtown, northern in through Hunterdon County, and then go north of Route 78, 4.5. Up in Oxford, New Jersey, Hackettstown, 4.5, and then over into Bergen County, mainly east of the Garden State Parkway here. Franklin Lakes, 3.9. Wayne, New Jersey, 3.5. Cedar Grove, 4.1. West Orange, 3.5. So clearly there was an outperformance here. And then even further up the Hudson Valley, you can see numbers in the, 2 to 3 inch range. Southwest Connecticut, 2.1. In Weston, Connecticut, up in Roxbury, 2.9, and then the numbers really just kind of tail off completely once you go once you go toward Hartford. Burlington, Connecticut with 3 inches, 3.3 inches in Torrington. So you get the idea here, folks. The numbers were from a system like this, the numbers were fairly solid. Now, I just want to go back, and I always do this. By the way, before I even do that, I want to just make sure that everything is copacetic. No one is saying that there are issues with sound or anything else, so that is good. Good to hear. And all right, so let me try this again. I want to go to, I'm going to try and bring up my snowfall forecast map. And this was what I put out yesterday after I beefed everything up just a little bit. And in hindsight, okay, I probably should have pulled the line down of the trace by another 20 or 30 miles, and I might have had a much better forecast out of this. The 3 to 5 area actually came out pretty decent, but it also needed to be beefed up a little bit further to the south. So I was going south of what the models were doing, and apparently it wasn't south enough. So maybe where the 1 is probably would have been a good place to put the 3, and then have that 3 to 5 zone expanded a little bit further to the east. The trace line just needed to be a handful of miles certainly south of Trenton, obviously. So the 2 was down there. So I got the basic idea, but I needed to shift it further to the east by a good 25 to 40 miles altogether. I think it would have been a a much better forecast all the way around. And by the way, this is in winters where it wants to snow, and we certainly have been in a situation over the last 3 weeks where we've had 5 storms in 3 weeks that uh, everything, number wise, we seem to finish on the upside, and that was definitely the case today. So in those kind of winters, you certainly want to think about the fact that maybe you're not high enough in your forecast. On the other hand, you take a winter like the last 2 winters, and you look at things, and you might come to the opposite conclusion and say that, well, maybe we were too high. But again, not the best forecast in the world, but not too bad. There were obvious misses, and there obviously you were going to need some updates on the fly. Also, I don't know if Bill Rogers is on tonight because he has been screaming at me in a nice way to get a good looking radar. And guess what? I found one, and this is from UCAR, uh, uh, weather.ral.ucar.edu. And I think this is a very good looking radar display of the full US and, of course, the individual radar stations. And this radar actually is updates even faster than the old Weather Service US radar, which was always about 20 or 30 minutes behind. So we're at 741, and the last frame on this is from 7:35. So it's only 5 minutes old. And you can see here, we still have precip going on in eastern New England. The back edge has now moved out of Connecticut and has cleared Long Island. We've got showers this evening down into the Carolina coast. Those are now moving offshore. And I think Timothy Veltman pointed out in the chat board that, because I'm in North Georgia right now, I got some heavy downpours earlier today, but didn't hear any thunder or see any lightning, so that was good. We have a new upper air disturbance that's moving through the Great Lakes. So you can see some snow showers up here in parts of northern Wisconsin that are moving southeastward. Also seeing a little bit of snow up in upstate New York. And of course, it is busy up in the Pacific Northwest with some rain there and some snow as you move up into parts of Idaho and in western Montana. Down in Florida, a little bit of scattered shower and thunderstorm activity there on the southern end of the front. But otherwise, much of the country is on the quiet side at the moment. And we're going to do, I'll bring up the watches and warnings. We still have winter weather advisories up for Maine and parts of central New Hampshire. Otherwise, all the advisories are done. New advisories tonight in the Northern Plains, in North Dakota, across to parts of northern Minnesota, northwestern Wisconsin. Also back up through Idaho and western Montana. Winter storm warnings up in Washington State. To the east of Seattle, up in the Cascades, and some advisories at some of the higher mountaintops that are to the west of Seattle, and the rest of the country again pretty much on the quiet side. So our systems moved along. One of the things that happened today that's really important for forecasting in the future, particularly if in the New York area. So this all came about. Whoops. This all came about on a south wind. Now, the south wind developed right away. The cold air that we had over the weekend moved out, the high moved out, and this cold front moved quickly in. And that was one of the keys here, is you didn't have this sort of long, drawn-out period of waiting for the next front to arrive and waiting for the precip arrive. The precip came in a hurry. There was still cold air around, and you had some really good dynamics. So you had a lot of vertical motion. You wound up getting some dynamic cooling. I know a number of folks. I saw some messages from folks. Joe Ferranda, I don't know if he's on tonight, but he pointed out he was sitting at 37 degrees with heavy snow falling where he is. Where he was on Long Island. And that's sort of what happened here. You had a lot of places that by 10 o'clock this morning had temperatures up, excuse me, in the mid to upper 30s. The south wind coming up over land And having driven these a few days ago down I-81, I can tell you that there was snow cover. Well, also down 95. I drove 95 down to Washington, D.C., and then took 66 to Route 81. There was snow cover on the ground down to Washington, and particularly once you went north and west of Washington, there was actually some relatively substantial snow cover there all the way to the west. So you've got a south wind coming up on snow cover. There was no time for that wind. It wasn't like we had a high move out and then we had a southwest wind set up for a day or a day and a half, bringing up warmer air. This was just almost instantaneous. So the initial push was really not all that warm. Along the immediate coast, the south wind comes in off the 40-degree ocean. That didn't really wreck the boundary layer completely. So a lesson learned in situations like this. Yeah, it's supposed to change over to rain, but sometimes the models don't get it right. And the NAM actually, in some respects, did okay, but it didn't do nearly as well as the parallel GFS. Apparently, the parallel GFS caught this very early, and this time around, it hit a home run. Meanwhile, out in the western U.S., you're seeing moisture coming into the Pacific Northwest, and everything now, as you notice, is moving west to east. So this is going to be, we don't have a block anymore. We are just going to see weather systems just kind of move along, which means that we warm up ahead of cold fronts, then we cool down behind them, and it's going to be really tough going forward in the next week to 10 days to pull off any kind of snow event. In the pattern that we're going to be in, it's going to really require an absolutely perfect setup of some kind. It's not impossible that you could get a cold high to come down and set up some kind of wave. You might have seen the models over the last couple of days trying to show something like that. That's not going to wind up happening, but it gives you the general idea of how it could possibly happen under certain circumstances. WPC showing some rather wet weather across the lower Mississippi Valley and into the Tennessee Valley over the next 7 days. Some 2.5 to 5 inch rainfall amounts in some areas, pushing eastward into the central Appalachians, 1/4 to a 1/2 inch from Pennsylvania to southern New England, down through New Jersey. Not a whole lot of precip in the southeast, particularly down near the coast. A little bit of action in Florida, a little bit of action back through North Texas and eastern Oklahoma, across the northern plains. You're seeing basically up to a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch. So nothing really here to write home about, and more active weather and moisture up into the Pacific Northwest. The WPC, and I've got this set up. This is the probability of at least, let's go to the 72-hour. It's probably better to look at that. We'll look at this new 72-hour forecast for at least 2 inches. And you see where most of the snow is going to fall. Northern Maine, northern half of Maine, northern Vermont, northernmost New Hampshire. Some areas in upstate New York east of Lake Ontario could do well here with this disturbance coming through tomorrow. Up along the northern lakes, and then some action as you get out into the Rockies from Colorado northwestward up into Montana and Idaho, and on up into the Pacific Northwest. Fairly high probabilities of at least 2. I just kind of jumped it over to a probability of at least 8. And you can see even in these areas here, you've got some patches here where the probabilities of at least 8 inches are running rather high. Okay, so let's look at the upper air. And you may have noticed that this is a lot different from what we've been used to in those last days of January and in the first 15 or so days of February when we had the block. Things have certainly changed up in northern Canada. We've went from having a blocking high in northern Canada. Now we have a low, a vortex that is sitting up in northwest Canada. Instead of ridging up in the northwest with that negative East Pacific oscillation, we've got troughing again. So there's not really a strong polar connection here, just a little bit coming out of Western Canada and this is this was back on last Friday here, where we've got this upper trough that was to the west, and that of course moved on through. We'll clean this up here. And by the way, out of this trough, at least for Long Island, I have to go back and look and see how many consecutive hours of precip fell there. But for a 72-hour period, the vast majority of the time, it was snowing on Long Island. So it was quite an interesting stretch that started on Thursday of last week and lasted right through Saturday, believe it or not, until this upper trough pulled on out. Now, of course, it's gone. And as we move through this week, we've got several systems that are approaching. We get one tomorrow. You can see it moving through the northeast. And then that goes out, lifts up and out. You're not going to really get much out of this, but it will trigger off some rain and snow showers. Then for Wednesday, we have an opportunity, I think, on Wednesday, depending on how much sun we see, that we could have some rather warm temperatures. We'll give it a look. I don't have all the numbers that printed out because the Weather Service digital forecast database is having a bit of a problem. But in the darker brown here, or red, or whatever that color is, you got 60s pushing all the way up to the Washington, D.C. area, and 50s to about New York, so just south and west of New York City. I think these numbers could wind up being higher if we manage to get enough sun. I don't think we're going to have a sea breeze issue on Wednesday, but we do have another cold front that's going to be coming by. So we'll go back to the upper air here, and you see the trough, the next trough, just kind of rolling on in. There's a little bit of a colder flow here, right in here, and that brings our temperatures down for Thursday and Friday and into the beginning of the weekend. But then, of course, it changes. We have a troughing again, dropping down into the western United States, sort of a flat ridge here in the east. And that's going to mean for milder temperatures at some point over the weekend. Obviously, again, no blocking at all. We do have some higher than normal pressures building up in Greenland and Iceland. We would need that to kind of push further to the west. This time around, it's more to the east. And again, going into next week, Monday, we've got a trough that moves on out, ridging behind it. The flow, again, is pretty much straight out of the Pacific. Cold air in Canada just moves straight across. And then running through in the longer term, some kind of upper low here around day 9 or 10 that the models have been kind of showing from time to time, and that lifts on up the coast the first weekend of the month of March, which is March 6th and 7th. And then, of course, beyond that, you don't really. I mean, this is not a winter. This is not a snow lover's upper air. Let's put it that way. It's far from what it was. Okay, so on to let's go to European. Why don't we do that? Let's look at the European, see what the European has to say, and I'm thinking that it probably doesn't have to have much to say that's that different from the GFS here. We can just run the upper air starting from tomorrow, and again, there's your disturbance for Tuesday. Your cold front that moves through late Wednesday, not having much with it. Again, that colder look for a day or two, and then we sort of lose that. When we go into the first days of March, there's just a little hint here. You got a little ridge up that way, a little trough over here. So, I mean, there is a little bit of a colder flow coming out of Canada. It's not cross-polar. It's moving pretty much west to east. And then that goes out. And then, of course, you've got, system here. You got this. You got this. You do have systems here that are going to bear some watching. But again, without some kind of, cross-polar flow, you don't really have the kind of cold air that you want to, that a snow lover is going to want to have. So we're definitely going into a break period here. I don't think there's any question of that. And it's going to take us at least through the first week of March. Whether we get another window of opportunity after that remains to be seen, but not impossible. Again, still, you might wind up with something that times out just perfectly in those brief moments where you get some cold air intrusion coming down from the north. But it's going to have to be perfect here. And honestly, we had a very, very active three and a half week period, and that's pretty good for the areas down near the I-95 corridor. That's actually how it usually happens. It's rare that you have a winter where it's like that for 3 months, but it's more than likely that you get these occasional windows. We had one in December, then we had that long period where we had nothing, and then of course we had this recent window that started at the end of January and just carried us through today. If you want to, if you want to count today's system, here's tomorrow's. Again, a little upper trough that goes on by. This is not going to be like today. First of all, we're not working with a south wind tomorrow. We're working with a west-northwest wind, which is drier. Also, the air is not particularly cold that we're dealing with. So there'll be some snow showers and probably some scattered rain showers too. Wednesday, that feeble attempt to warm up. We're going to try to see if we could push 50s up into southern New England before another front goes on by. Not too much with that. Then we get some colder air for Thursday and Friday. You can see there's a lot of action out in the west. This area of rain that develops down in Texas and Louisiana, Mississippi, this was what this area, the models were trying to show maybe some kind of more important wave coming out, but everything is just too flat and it really doesn't do much with it until we get to the weekend and a little bit of that moisture tries to lift up northward, not without much success. And then maybe something stronger behind it. There's a little high there coming down with some colder air early next week into the western lakes. And it does bring some kind of cold front and develops a storm when it gets over to Nova Scotia. So with that could be one of those periods where you wind up getting cold for a day or two. And then, of course, the high sort of hangs around. It's not the highest quality cold air that we could see. And then here comes another wave that comes up from the south. Again, not much cold air around. You get a low that tracks underneath you, but if you don't have that polar connection, you're not going to be able to do much with it. So here we are going into the month of March. Some storminess does develop. Not seeing anything really to write home about in terms of strength at this point. But as always with weather, what you see one day and what you see the next day or the day after could wind up being somewhat different. So it's been a long time, by the way, since I've done a show by myself. I've almost forgotten how to do that. Oh, good Lord. I just love, by the way, I know uh, we've got 75 likes on the board tonight. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. It may be a tough a tough task to ask to get to 100, but it would make me feel good to get to 100. Steve Lapointe hitting super chat tonight, as saying, smash the thumbs up button under the YouTube video for the Joe and Joe show. And again, Joe taking the day off today because of the surprise snow up his way has left him utterly exhausted. So he's getting. Fled Weather says, looking at the ensembles at Joe Chaffee, a good number of them are showing a potential perfect setup for early next week. That's the only way it's going to happen. It has to be perfect with cold air, some kind of bubble of cold air coming down at the same time. You get a good sharp trough to move on through. I didn't get a chance to look at the ensembles, but I will give them a look after the show, and I will, of course, evaluate, and we'll see when we come back tomorrow whether the models take us on a different road, which again is always possible. Adam Lowe say, I agree with Frank Riccio, who I hope you're getting better, Frank. I live within a quarter of a mile of the ocean, and the warm ocean has made this winter much more. Adam, that's a really good point, and it's been touched upon a number of times by a few different people. The ocean water temperatures usually this time of year are at their lows, and we're usually in the upper 30s. In some colder winters, we've actually been down even lower, down in the middle 30s. But we're seeing water temperatures that are still at around 43, 44, 45. I think that really has had a big impact for the areas east of the Garden State Parkway in New Jersey. Normally, I think you would have probably gotten much more snow out of these weather systems that we saw in the last 3 weeks than you did. And I think the primary reason is because of the abnormally warm water temperatures. They've been running in the shelf offshore a good 5 degrees above normal for the entire winter, and actually for a lot longer than that. So I don't know what's going on as to why there's this area of very warm temperatures out in the Atlantic east of us, but it definitely has had an impact on the snow amounts right along the immediate coast. Not so much for Long Island because Long Island's orientation is west east, and so it's an east wind or a southeast wind that gets brings the warm air in, but that brings the warm air in for everybody. On the other hand, it was mostly snow through a lot of these events. Where I know that in coastal central and southern New Jersey, dealing with rain and sleet, a lot of sleet in some of these events, and even some freezing rain. But snow was very hard to come by. Uh, Again, the ocean, the primary driver here. Robert Brown, nice to see you, Robert. Would you comment on the polar vortex low that affected Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana? Well, uh, it was it was very certainly fascinating to watch from a weather perspective to see cold air of that magnitude go as far south as it did. I don't think I mean, I know I have never seen the entire state of Texas under a winter storm warning at the same time. I believe that you could probably say that now there have been very bitter cold outbreaks before that have had large impacts across the South and in the Southern Plains and down through Texas and reaching down even into South Texas. I was in one back in the early '80s that did go all the way down. I was working in Corpus Christi at the time, and we had temperatures near freezing with freezing rain. But this one was really exceptional in terms of its magnitude. And I think it's one of those things that they're sort of generational events, and it's also I get you feel when it happens, it's kind of like when you get pulled over by a cop on the highway, and maybe you get a ticket. Hopefully you don't, knock on wood. But when that happens for the next several days, you start to feel like you're going to get stopped. You're going to get stopped at any time, one after another after another. That's sort of where we are with this. I think there's this, the sort of general feeling that this is going to be a regular occurrence every year. I don't think that you can say that. This was actually quite exceptional, and also from a different perspective. And this is something that I can tell you when I was in Louisiana and lived in New Orleans and worked there. The uh, uh, cold outbreaks had an impact on the electrical grid. I mean, that's not new. We talked about this before the cold air came down, when we saw that cold air was dropping down as far south as it was. That when it gets this cold in those areas in the south, it's the electrical system is not built to handle the huge demand on electricity that occurs in colder weather down in Texas and in Louisiana and across the deep south. So it did certainly expose a vulnerability uh, of, um, of the power grid, and that has to be addressed because it's going to happen again, where we're going to wind up with a cold air mass. And by the way, one of the more interesting um, um, now I lost my train of thought. We're talking about about the cold blast. I was going to make a point. Now I've totally lost it. I need my partner. Where is he? Oh, now I remember. So initially, back and I remember seeing this on the models. It was initially for, in fact, Joe even pointed out about the fact that the models were taking the polar low across upstate New York and into New England, and he was talking about uh, seeing that retrograde back further and further west with every run. And in reality, it never really came anywhere close to coming across the Great Lakes or into the Northeast. But one of the things I did notice was in that in the sequence of model runs that was bringing that colder air here into the eastern part of the United States was that it was showing temperatures of -5 to -10 down near the coast. So I don't. There was no doubt in my mind that had that vortex moved into the east, that we would have seen probably a whole slew of record low temperatures that would have been set, even going below zero in New York City and in Baltimore, Washington D.C. would not have shocked me at all to see single digits below zero, and maybe even a few places getting into the low minus double digits. But that's all in theory now. It obviously didn't happen, so you can't prove a counterfactual. But um, just um, just bear that in mind. I mean, the magnitude of that cold air mass was was um, was something to behold, and it wound up that it wound going more to the south than it did to the east. And by going straight south, I mean there was nothing to stop it. There's no mountains between North Dakota and Texas. It's all plains. It's all flat plains. So the air mass just had a wide open alleyway to just drop straight south the way it did. So it was quite interesting with regards to that. So, Mr. Fairchild, I just want to point out that it's nice to have you here on the chat board and welcome, but please refrain from political conversation. We really don't do political conversation here. We do weather forecasting. I appreciate your right to your opinion, but it really doesn't kind of fit with what we're doing here. So just letting you know, we love any kind of weather chat and anything related to that would be certainly most welcome. So anyhow, I'm running through the chat right now, just seeing every seeing if there's any other questions or comments. See that the conversation gets a little lively here from time to time, which is always good. And yes, I did. I just had 3 days off, and I think it shows. I'm always a little rusty the first day back. I was like that when I worked in TV. When I took a week or two off, and then when I came back to work, I had a lot of trouble the first day or so, just collecting my thoughts and getting back into the groove of things. But I will be better tomorrow. And again, without Joe here, it's just I can't remember the last time I soloed a show. So Mr. Rayo will be back tomorrow, and everything will be back to normal. Adam Lowe's the polar vortex is now stronger than normal for this time of year. Absolutely. You know what? I can bring that up. I was looking at this yesterday with respect to what's going on in the stratosphere. So let me just bring that up. And indeed, we are seeing we saw a weaker polar vortex in the stratosphere from early January right into February. And since then, it has been strengthening. Now, if you think about the timing, because remember, we had splits in the polar vortex in early January and again in the middle of January. And we often mentioned about a 3-week lag. Well, it kind of played out almost perfectly in terms of the timing. So here it is. And now we've got the polar vortex. This is on the map for 16 days from now. It's wrapped up like a tight little ball there along the coast of Siberia. And it's actually this is usually a time of year where the polar vortex actually weakens just naturally. But because it was in such a weakened state in January and toward the beginning of February, that it's now strengthening, and it's stronger now than it was in the earlier part of the winter. And you see it there, right along the north coast of Siberia, and it's again wrapped up like a tight little ball. So this would. I don't see anything here. I know there's been some chatter about maybe some sort of stratospheric warming event to go on. at some point, but I'm not seeing it here on these runs. I did see some indication on one or two prior runs, but I'm not seeing it here. So we could certainly make a case that we're not going to get a pattern shift that is going to last more than a couple of days. So if you're looking for the possibility where we get another chance for accumulating snow in the eastern part of the United States, I'm just going to tell you it's going to have to come, uh, as I said earlier, it will have to come from an absolutely perfect setup because it really is not going to be able to do it um, with something that's going to last weeks. We're not going to see. I don't think we're going to see anything that's going to last weeks at a time. From what I'm gathering, I think we're going to see something that just kind of breaks and settles in for a few days, and if you get lucky, you wind up with one last snowfall event. So, all right. So you know what? I'm going to wrap it up. This was pretty difficult to do, to be honest with you. But I certainly did enjoy soloing. But I need my partner back, and I need him back in a big hurry. So Joe, go get a good night's sleep, and please come back tomorrow and 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 save me, okay? And the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which should be brought to you by our friends at Omni True Value Hardware, which I'm going to try and bring up right now on the screen. There we go. Omni True Value Hardware, they're getting ready for spring with spring yards and landscaping and everything else. 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, 631-756-1125. The telephone number, the website is omnitruevalue.com. And if we do get another winter storm, I think they still have some stuff left, but pretty soon it's going to be about mulch and topsoil and everything else. And also brought to you by Wholesale Holiday Lighting by Giannini at 162 Ocean Avenue in Lindenhurst, 631-957-5106. You can plan ahead now for the next holiday season. They are your holiday lighting specialists, and they will take care of all your decorating needs. Wholesale Holiday Lighting by Giannini. So thanks for being here tonight and bearing with me. Again, trying to go solo. Thank you, Steve Lapointe, for hitting Super Chat. Joe Rayo will be back tomorrow with me. And in the meantime, I think I'm going to go to bed. Oh, hold on. Let's see. Gusman Durang. No, Peter, Timothy, I got to read this. I'm a trash weatherman, he says. You need to get better forecasts. They are truly disgraceful and put a lot of people in danger. Okay. I don't know what to say. I've only been doing this for 40 years. Okay. You know what? Let's get rid of him. So he's gone. Yeah, I got rid of somebody. That is so cool. All right. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night.